The ball is on the 25 and it is 1st and 10. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the show. Today we're going to be grading every single pick of round one of the 2025 NFL draft. Sorry if I'm not talking at like my highest pitch. It's like midnight and I don't want to wake my neighbors up. So hopefully you guys understand. Again, today we're going to be grading every single pick. It's just me today, just Metro. Unfortunately, Cade could not join me. He's probably passed out drunk on his couch because of course, the draft party. You got to respect it. But your boy is holding us down. We'll be going through every single grade of every single pick. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. All right, so we are going to begin with first overall pick. Cam Ward goes to the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to give this one a B+, just for the simple fact that I don't think Cam Ward is like the craziest first overall project or first overall pick, I should say. I view him more as a bit of a project player that needs time to develop. I will say I do think that he is worth the first overall pick in this specific draft class, but just in like a more traditional draft class with more talent, I see him being more worthy of like a top 10/top 20 pick. He kind of reminds me in some ways of like Justin Fields, where Fields was clearly not a top 5 talent, but taking him top 15 was not crazy. I give this one a B+ because I think it was the right move for Tennessee. It just happens to be that, for my opinion, it's a tad bit of a reach. All right, we're going to move on to number 2 here. We're going to talk about Travis Hunter. The Jacksonville Jaguars make a trade to pick Travis Hunter. Now, for the sake of argument, I'm only going to be looking at the prospect that they end up taking. I'm not actually going to look too much into detail regarding the actual trade. I will say, pretty sure they gave up a first-round pick next year, so they're taking kind of a risky bet and play here on Travis Hunter. I do think this one will ultimately work out. Travis Hunter, receiver and corner. I think he will play both sides for Jacksonville, at least early on into his career. Hopefully, they can draft a cornerback or receiver in the future to take over this role so Travis can focus on just one spot, but I kind of have a feeling he's going to have to play both sides, especially if Jacksonville does want to succeed. I give this one an A+. Travis Hunter, to me, was clearly the best player in this draft. Jacksonville had the 5th overall pick. They had to make a move to get Travis Hunter at 2nd overall, and I just think it's the right pick. He addresses such a massive need. Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr. is just going to be a disgusting duo, so it's hard to hate the pick. This is an awesome pickup, and yeah, this is a great move for Jacksonville. Then there's Abdul Carter going to the New York Giants. Admittedly speaking, I've never loved the fit of Abdul going to New York just because they already have Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau. So it kind of just feels like you're piling on to what is already a strength of your team. But the way that the prospects were set up this year, there was a pretty sizable gap between Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and then everyone below them. So the Giants were kind of forced to take Abdul Carter here. It wasn't like you were going to reach on a tackle or a corner in this year's draft. Like, you kind of had to take Abdul Carter, and that's what they ultimately did. I do wonder what the future of Kayvon Thibodeau does look like. Does he get traded? Does he stick around? I don't know. But what I do know is Abdul Carter is an awesome player. Him and Brian Burns are just going to be a nasty duo. So I'm going to give this one a B simply because I don't love Abdul going to the Giants, but I do love the Giants getting a talent like Abdul Carter at pick 3. Moving on to the 4th overall pick, the New England Patriots sit tight at number 4 and don't overthink it and take Will Campbell. I'm going to give this one a B+, just because it is the right pick, but it wasn't the flashiest pick. It's just the pick that, in my opinion, made the most sense. They were in a situation where they wanted Hunter, they wanted Abdul Carter. Neither one of those guys happened to fall to them, so they just take, in my opinion, one of the best players available in one of their biggest needs, and they take Will Campbell. I think he starts off at tackle and then moves to guard depending on if he succeeds or not at tackle. So yes, I'm going to give this one a solid B+. I'm going to move through some of these easier ones that are just kind of, like the Will Campbell to New England. It's kind of a basic one where you kind of all know everything. But as we go down the board to some more unique picks, I'll have a deeper in-depth conversation. I also don't want to take an hour of your time, so that's why I'm kind of speeding through some of these ones that we already have a lot of information on. This is one that I will spend a little bit of some time on. Mason Graham to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Browns had the 2nd overall pick. They traded down with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars took Travis Hunter. Cleveland sticks and picks Mason Graham here. I have been pretty high on Mason Graham throughout the entire process, but as time has gone on, it has felt like his draft stock has been plummeting a little bit, where he was a consensus top 10 pick, or at least top 5 pick, and then later in, he became more of like a consensus top 15 pick. And I've always been on board saying he's an elite prospect, and maybe not a blue chip guy, but a very good prospect. And I just think for Cleveland in this year's draft class specifically, they needed to come away with something, I guess, a little bit flashier. And they had Travis Hunter in their back pocket. And I understand stash and take extra draft capital next year in what should hopefully be a better draft. I just kind of feel as if Mason Graham is not the greatest pick of all time. I think I might have just preferred sticking with Travis Hunter, especially now knowing how the board went and knowing that Shedeur Sanders did not go in round 1. And then you could have paired Shedeur Sanders with Travis Hunter. I think that would have been such a great story, but they decided not to do it. They traded back for Mason Graham. And don't get me wrong, Mason Graham next to Myles Garrett is going to be nasty. Just kind of for me, I would have maybe preferred just a Travis Hunter pick there and just maybe not overthink it. But you will get 2 first-round picks next year. Decent chance Jacksonville is not particularly great next year, so you're going to get probably a top 10 pick of your own and then maybe a top 15 pick from Jacksonville. One of those maybe could luck you into potentially moving into the number 1 overall pick for maybe an Arch Manning or Lenora Sellers or whatever might be the case. For Mason Graham, though, I mean, he's a good replacement for Dalvin Tomlinson. He's definitely an upgrade over what they've had. So I just give it a B- just because I think I would have preferred them just taking Travis Hunter. But again, not the worst pick in the world. So we will move on to the Las Vegas Raiders taking Ashton Jeanty. Again, don't really feel like I've talked too much about this one. Jeanty was the consensus pick if he was available for the Raiders, and the Raiders actually pulled the trigger on him. Don't get me wrong, the Raiders have a lot of other needs, receiver, corner, maybe a right tackle, but they went with who I think is one of the few actual blue chip prospects. It's Jeanty, Carter, and then Travis Hunter. Those are the only quote unquote blue chip prospects in my opinion. Maybe you could convince me into a Will Campbell / Mason Graham, but even then, I don't see blue chip prospect. I do see it with Ashton Jeanty, and I think it's just the right pick. Their running game was atrocious last year. You're not going to bank on Raheem Mostert being your only guy. Jeanty steps in there, can be your 3-down back, and just give Geno Smith some actual support on that offense. Brock Bowers, Ashton Jeanty, Geno Smith, just add a receiver down the line, and I think things will look a little bit nicer. So I like this move for the Las Vegas Raiders. A- in my opinion. All right, the New York Jets end up sticking on the trenches and taking Armand Membou to, I would assume, play right tackle for this team. You took Fashanu last year at your left tackle spot. You've already felt pretty okay about your interior offensive line. The last real big need on this line has been that right tackle spot, especially because Tyron Smith's out the door and Morgan Moses is out the door. Now you have your 2 young superstar tackles in Membou and Fashanu for the future, and I like it. I still think that tight end is a huge need. Receivers also a huge need, and they probably could use some help on the defensive line as well, primarily within the interior. But again, fortunately for them, it's a pretty deep class, and they could probably find some more starters down the road. Membou fixes a major issue, and I think they're more building towards the future with this pick rather than trying to win immediately. Aaron Glenn is a smart guy. I like this pick. I give it a B+, just because it's not like the flashiest pick. So yeah, B+, right pick. We move on to what was a flashy pick. The Carolina Panthers take Tetairoa McMillan, somebody who has been, I mean, let's just be honest, all over the board. I've seen Tetairoa McMillan in mock drafts taken as late as like 24, 23 to the Packers. And most of the time I saw mock drafts that had him going to the Dallas Cowboys. But Carolina takes a bit of a risky move here by not picking a defensive player at pick 8. Now, I am of 2 minds with this pick. On one hand, I think Ted is a fantastic player that is going to fit really nicely with Bryce Young, not to mention Xavier Legette. They have some legit size on that receiving core. And you ideally think Ted could be that go-to guy for Bryce Young, which he just hasn't quite had in his career outside of like Adam Thielen, who's, of course, getting into his mid-30s, or I don't know, is he into his late 30s? I don't know at this point. I just kind of look at it and say, man, that defense was so bad last year. And then you did some things in the offseason to address it, but nothing like overly serious. And then here you are at pick 8 with Jalen Walker on the board, Mike Green, Will Johnson, your pick of the litter. And you take a receiver in Ted McMillan when I think you maybe could have waited to round 2 and take like an Alec Ayomaner or Jaden Higgins. But again, Ted is clearly better than those guys. So on one hand, I like the pick, but on the other hand, I'm like, gosh, that defense sucks. So I give it a B- because of it. I really was thinking that Ted was not going to go to the Panthers because I thought, hey, they're really going to focus in on defense. But I guess you also could be at the mindset that like, hey, we're not going to be a championship quality team these next like 2-3 years. So we could stack things on our offense and then really down the line focus on our defense. But I don't know. I think I would have just preferred maybe a bit more of a defensive focused draft. And that starts with pick 8. With that said, they still have a lot of talented players on the board in round 2. Like we'll get some starts for this team. So again, I'm of 2 minds. I like it, but I also don't like it. I'll give it a B- just to, stay consistent here. All right, my offensive tackle one in this year's draft class has been Kelvin Banks the entire time. I think he's a better tackle than Will Campbell, primarily because I think Will Campbell's better as a guard. I've been pretty consistent that I trust I trust Banks more than I do with Armand Membu, even though you can make the argument that Membu had the better season last year. I just trust Banks' entire body of work more so than Membu's. And so for New Orleans, they were in a situation where a lot of us thought it was going to be defensive line, and it could have been defensive line. I still think they might take that in round two, but they took Kelvin Banks to what I assume is going to be their Trevor Penning replacement of the future. Now, if Penning does somehow magically work out now that he's into what I think his fifth or fourth year, whatever might be the case, then I guess you just keep Banks at guard. But let's be honest, it's probably not going to work out. So even if you don't even want to start Penning this upcoming year, you can just move Banks at left tackle and Fawonga to right tackle, where he's probably a bit more natural at. Or you can just keep it as it is right now and move Banks inside to play guard. I don't know how they're going to do it. Regardless, I just think Banks is just an awesome player. He's not going to be the greatest Hall of Fame level tackle, but man, he's just going to be solid for this team. He's going to make some Pro Bowls. He might make an All-Pro team here or there. I just look at Banks and I say, you know what? I'm getting a surefire hit. I'm getting a good player. And for the Saints, you're getting a good player. And that's all that matters. So I give this one an A-. I love my guy, Kelvin Banks. We're now on to maybe the first pure surprise of the draft. I think so far all the picks have been not necessarily surprising, maybe besides Tet to the Carolina Panthers. But even then, if you told me that Tet went to the Panthers, I wouldn't have been like, whoa, this was the first time that actually kind of came out of me where I was like, oh, wow, okay, interesting. And I'm kind of similar to the Tet pick. I'm kind of two minds with this one as well, where on one hand, I don't hate Loveland going to Chicago, but on the other hand, I'm like, hey, Tyler Warren is, in my opinion, pretty clearly the better tight end prospect. But I think for a team like Chicago that already has Cole Kmet, this might have been a team that says, you know what, we feel comfortable with Kmet being more of your traditional tight end. And when I say traditional tight end, I mean somebody who's a bigger guy, can get inside and be more of an inline blocker. Whereas for Colston Loveland, he's sort of a unique tight end where he's just not an inline blocker right now. He cannot be somebody who's one-on-one with an edge rusher or anything like that. But you can find ways to use his blocking abilities and screens, dump-offs, underneath stuff. So they're going to probably run some 12 personnel, and I think that's going to be a very interesting unit with Colston and Cole Kmet, who both are pretty good receiving tight ends in their own way, especially Colston Loveland. I just think he's going to be a good player for the Chicago Bears. I trust DJ Moore. I trust Roma Dunze. I trust Colston Loveland. And, man, you want to surround Caleb Williams with as much talent as possible. I think that this is kind of a fun pick that can do so. The Bears have done so much work in the offseason to just address their major needs that they kind of were at a point of privilege with having the 10th overall pick where they could just sort of pick whoever they want, whoever fell into their lap, whether it was Genty or one of the top tackles. And none of those guys particularly fell for them. And so they were kind of in a situation where, do we want to reach on an edge rusher, which they didn't, or do we want to go ahead and just pick up one of the best tight ends in this class? And that's what they ultimately did. So I give this one a B- just simply because throughout the entire process, I've never been terribly high on Colston Loveland. I've been pretty consistent on this one that I don't think he's a top 15 prospect in this class. So taking him 10 for me is a little bit rich, but at the same time, if this team had a first round grade on Colston and truly believes he can be a difference maker, then I see no problem with it. I give it a B-, but you can sway me into a B on this one. All right, this was the first pick where I think I had sort of a negative look on it, but at the same time, I also can see the positives to it. Give me 1 second. I need to get a sip of water. It's only me talking. I'm usually talking back and forth with me and Cade. It's just me this time, so I gotta take a sip. Give me 2 seconds. All right, I'm back. My apologies. But yeah, I mean, Micah Williams for me, I had a late first to early second round grade on Michael. There was a number of different edge rushers I had a higher grade on, but I can see why a team like San Francisco would be interested in Micah Williams. And that's simply because he's 20 years old. He has a great size and frame and look to him. He's already going to be a really good run defender at the NFL level. It just comes down to, can you get something out of him as a pass rusher? This was a Niners team that, frankly, kind of got eviscerated in the offseason. A lot of pieces on the defensive line left. A lot of pieces all over the board left this team. And, I mean, you looked at the defensive line outside of Nick Bosa, and it just did not look very good. Adding Micah Williams is somebody who does present a very high ceiling, but also a pretty safe floor where you feel pretty comfortable that he can be a good run stuffer and maybe be something as a pass rusher. The only reason why I give it a C is I have a hard time taking the 11th overall pick on a guy that I just don't know if is going to be anything of a pass rusher, and that's just me. So if you're high on Michael, if you think that he can truly end up becoming a good pass rusher, then hey, I totally understand the pick at 11, but I worry about his pass rush reps. I just didn't see a whole lot at Georgia. I do know, though, that he's going to be a really good run defender, and he has the size and look that I'm willing to bet on. So I can understand why they would take him. Just maybe I would have preferred like a trade back for Michael or maybe just another player, but I give it a C. I'm also somebody who can easily be swayed. So if you say, hey, change that to a C plus and I'll give you $1, I might just change it. So then we get the Dallas Cowboys at 12. And I think if you watch on my personal channel, by the way, go check me out at MetroSports. I'll have the link in the description, as well as, of course, Cade's channel. He does a lot of NFL draft content too. His content is super underrated. Go ahead and check it out. I love his content. But yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, by the way, my favorite team. I'm wearing a Mavericks shirt, so you know I'm from Dallas. But I did not expect Tyler Booker. And in hindsight, I probably should have expected it because this pick is it just screams Dallas Cowboys. It just completely does. They do this every year where they kind of keep things under the wraps, but certain things do come out. And then they end up just taking a guard or a tackle that you don't suspect. And then it actually usually does work out. I mean, they did it with Zach Martin, Travis Frederick. They kind of did it with Tyron Smith. And more recently, they did it with Tyler Smith. And that's been a home run hit. And they did it with Tyler Guyton. And we'll have to wait and see. And this year, it's Tyler Booker. So I'm of two minds. And I'm going to probably say that throughout this video. On one side of things, I think, okay, maybe he can be your right guard of the future. I think he's a solid scheme fit. And if it does work out, and let's say Guyton develops nicely, your three Tylers, Guyton, Smith, and Booker, are going to be your foundational offensive linemen for the next, hopefully, 10 years. But on the other side of things, I say, who's going to run the football? Who is Dak going to throw the ball to outside of CeeDee Lamb? And the entire offseason, the entire conversation regarding Dallas has been, is Dallas going to trade down? Are they going to get McMillan? Are they going to get Genty? Are they going to draft Matthew Golden? And obviously the board didn't fall particularly great for them, but I was thinking that if Tet was off the board, Dallas was going to trade back and then see where the board went for them then. And then they didn't trade back and they just took Tyler Booker. And so for me, if Dallas is so sure that Booker was worth the 12th overall pick, then I won't doubt them because they typically do pretty well at judging offensive linemen. But for my personal opinion, I think that Booker's a little bit slow-footed, and I do have serious concerns about that. But if Dallas can get the best out of him, if he fits their scheme nicely, this one could work out. I think I just would have preferred if they had traded back a few spots and then took Booker or Matthew Gordon or whoever. I think I would have felt more comfortable with that pick, but because they didn't and they just spent the 12th overall pick on Tyler Booker, it feels a little rich for me, but again, you could sway me into upgrading this grade, but I'm going to stick pretty sternly here on C minus, but I think this one could work out though. That's the good news for Dallas. So we'll move on to 13. The Miami Dolphins, kind of out of nowhere, I would say, took Kenneth Grant. It felt like the entire offseason it's been, we're going to address the offensive line. And then unfortunately for the Dolphins, the board just did not fall very nicely for them. No Banks, no Membu, no Will Campbell, obviously. So they could have maybe reached on Gray Zabel. Maybe they could have reached on Connerly or Simmons, but I don't know with the way the board fell. I kind of think they just did the best case scenario here. I would have personally went with Walter Nolan, but if you go Kenneth Grant, I easily can see it. In fact, I kind of do see a little Christian Wilkins in Kenneth Grant, although Kenneth Grant's a way more unrefined player. Like he has a lot of stuff he has to unlock still, but I could see a little bit of some Christian Wilkins in this guy. I think it's a good pick. The Dolphins' interior defensive line room was just lacking options, just lacking bodies. I think they only had like 4 guys signed, maybe a few more that I'm missing, but they just didn't have a lot of bodies there. And the guys they did have, I don't know how many of them would have been like great players, but Kenneth Grant, he presents a high ceiling while also pretty safe floor. Like worst case scenario, he's a good run defender that gets you 3-4 sacks a season. Best case scenario, he's a high level run defender and a solid pass rusher. So, I mean, when you're hearing people from Michigan saying that this guy was supposed to be better than Mason Graham, I think you have to take it pretty seriously. So I like this pick for Miami. I do think Miami Dolphins fans might be a little bit disappointed because they might have wanted like Will Johnson or Malachi Starks, and I understand that. But hey, Dolphins fans, Will Johnson fell to the second round, so you get Kenneth Grant and maybe you trade up for Will Johnson. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. but I give it a B. Tyler Warren to Indianapolis. This one, it felt like it was fate for the longest time that this was going to happen. And then the closer we got to the draft, the more and more it felt like no shot Tyler Warren makes it to 14. And that was like kind of like a shot in the arm to all Colts fans because they were like, ah, man, we really want Tyler Warren. He just fits our team so perfectly. But hey, look, guys, it actually happened. You guys ended up with Tyler Warren, and I think this is just best case scenario for both teams. I mean, for Tyler Warren's side of things, you get to go to Indianapolis where you're clearly the go-to option on offense. I mean, sure, you got Jonathan Taylor, you got Michael Pittman, but man, they spent a 14th overall pick on a tight end. They sure as hell are going to use this guy. And for Anthony Richardson, who needs a go-to dump-off option, I think Tyler Warren could be that guy, not to mention the versatility of using him as like a running back or a quarterback could also make for some really fun, unique plays with Shane Steichen. And I also think for the Colts side of things, like, dog, this team just needed a tight end. For the past couple of years, they've needed it, and they finally got the guy in Tyler Warren. I just think this is the home run pick. I give it an A+, and that's just because the talent fell into their hands. They did not overthink it, and they just took the best player available in a massive position of need. And I think this Colts team just significantly got better on offense. Of course, the whole thing kind of does come down to Anthony Richardson, but at least they kind of figured out their tight end room. So good for the Colts. I really like this pick, and I was really hoping this was going to happen, and it happened, so good for them. Nearing the halfway point, but we get to Jalen Walker, who fell to 15. It's kind of funny. It felt like for weeks now, we've been talking about how Jalen Walker was probably a lock for top 10, and here we are at 15, and he happened to be available, and well, for the Atlanta Falcons, it just checks out completely. I mean, for the Falcons, you needed linebacking help. You also needed some edge rushing help. Shoot, Walker kind of fixes both those issues with one singular pick. Now, we'll get to a pick later down the board where the Falcons actually traded back into the first round. So we can kind of go into more detail regarding Jalen Walker then. So if you're a Falcons fan, just kind of hold on here for a second because I'm going to probably talk about Walker and who they took later in the draft in kind of a combined segment because I think they kind of are going to play a similar role with each other. So I give this singular pick an A-, but we'll get to him and his future teammate here in a second. So Falcons fans just kind of hang on here because I want to kind of push those two picks into one conversation. So 16, one of my more favorite picks of the draft class was Walter Nolan going to the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know why. I just never really, I mean, I might have done it in one or two mock drafts, but I never really truly considered Walter Nolan to Arizona. And it just kind of feels like, gosh, it just makes so much sense. Arizona did such a good job this offseason of addressing their edge rushing room, getting some interior defensive linemen, and all of a sudden that defensive line nowadays actually looks pretty good on paper. But then you say, hey, we're going to take this good defensive line on paper and snag a Walter Nolan to develop behind Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson, and he'll likely will get some run this year. And man, I just love the way that this defensive line is coming together. Josh Sweat is still relatively young. He's still developing. He's still going to become a great player. He already is a great player. Tomlinson and Calais Campbell are your two vets up the middle, and now you're developing a Walter Nolan. You already have a number of different edge rushers opposite of Josh Sweat that you feel really comfortable with. So I think this defensive line is really coming together. And Walter Nolan is a super high upside player where at his worst, he's going to be a good player. And when I say good player, I mean like, a good player. Not a great one, maybe just an average player, but a good enough player who'll get playing time. But best case scenario, dog, this dude's going to make all pros. So for Arizona, develop this guy, let him learn behind some veterans that can help with some of his maturity issues. And I just think that this is a fantastic pick for both sides. I just love this pick. I give this one an A-. Only reason why it's an A- and not an A+ is because he needs to develop. So there is a chance this one ends up really badly. But if it does happen to work out where he does develop, then this pick's going to end up looking really good for the Cardinals. So let's move on to now the second half of the draft with Shamar Stewart being the pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. I give this one a C+, and I'll explain my reasoning for this. I have been of the mind that the Bengals are a win-now team that kind of have to find instant contributors on offense. And unfortunately, I don't think Shamar Stewart is quite that early contributor. I think he's somebody that needs a lot of development, a lot of time in the lab. And unfortunately, he's going to be asked to play a lot and important snaps for this Bengals team because they kind of don't have anybody opposite of what we think is going to be Trey Hendrickson. Now, the good news for the Bengals is that if you do bring back Trey Hendrickson, you already have a guy who's a superstar And then you just need Shamar Stewart to develop alongside him. And if he does develop within the next 2-3 years, man, Shamar Stewart is that dude can be a dude. He can be somebody on your defensive line that you can trust because of his athletic and physical profile. With that said, lots of development is going to need to be happening here for Shamar. He's going to take some time. I don't think he's going to be a day one contributor that you can rely on to get you consistent sacks. But I think at the bare minimum, he will be a good disruptor early on that can develop into becoming a big time contributor. So I give this one a C plus just simply because I just think this team needed day one options. And unfortunately, I guess in some defense for Cincinnati, the board didn't fall particularly great for them. But I think Shamar Stewart will need development, but it's one of those picks that could end up looking so good 3-4 years from now. But at the same time, there's also the vice versa world where he never develops and he ends up kind of flaming out, which would suck for Cincinnati because they kind of need a hit. So I give this one a C plus. I definitely do think you could sway me into a B minus, but I guess I'll stay with my C plus here. All right, Gray Zabel to Seattle. Don't got to talk too much about this one. This was the thought to be consensus pick by most people. I'm actually kind of shocked that Seattle actually took the pick because it feels like when you consistently mock a team, a specific player, it almost feels like they don't take that player just to spite all you mock drafters out there. But Seattle did the right thing and just took the great player in Gray Zabel, who I think probably plays guard for them, but I think he can play tackle in a pinch, and I also think he can play center. He's just a great player that I think he fits their scheme perfectly. He's physical, rugged, tough, has that feel and look to the game that you want to play with. And man, you put him next to Charles Cross and hopefully a healthy Abraham Lucas, and that offensive line looks a lot better. So I just think Gray Zabel kind of fixes a lot of their issues with one pick. I still think they might draft another guard or tackle later in the draft, but for now, great pick here for the Seattle Seahawks. I give this one an A minus. All right, this is the first major head scratcher, and that's the Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, taking Emeka Egbuka. Now, I'll say this. I think Emeka Egbuka is an awesome player. I think he's easily worthy of a top 20 pick. I just kind of look at it and I say, you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, and you have McMillan. What was the point in taking another receiver? Now, did McMillan show me everything in year one that makes me think he's a bona fide superstar? No, but I also think he looked like a really capable third option. And Chris Godwin, you just paid, and Mike Evans is Mike Evans. Like, yes, they're older players, but Emeka Egbuka just at this stage just felt like a kind of a weird one here. Now, don't get me wrong, draft good players, and that's all that matters. And Emeka Egbuka is going to be a good player, and he's going to be a fun player for Baker Mayfield for the foreseeable future. But man, they needed an edge rusher. Jahad Campbell was on the board. They badly needed a linebacker. Jahdae Barron was still available. They could have used a corner. So I don't know. I'm again of two minds. On one hand, draft good players. Emeka Egbuka is a good player. But on the other hand, dang, man, you had a lot of other needs you needed to look to address, and you addressed maybe the one position you really didn't have to address. But I mean, Baker Mayfield has every option available. It's going to be tough to cover those guys, even with McMillan. They'll probably run some 4 receiver sets and just say, screw it, cover all of us. And the answer is going to be you can't, unless you're Denver, who I guess we'll talk about now. By the way, Emeka, I gave it a C just because I just think it's kind of a weird one where the Buccaneers really didn't need receiver, but he's a damn good player in Emeka Egbuka. So I don't know, kind of feel weird about it. But getting back to Denver, arguably one of my favorite picks of the draft. I'm not going to say it is my favorite, but one of. I'm a Jahdae Barron fan. I have been saying for the longest time that Jahdae Barron is my cornerback 1. I have been on the train that you can use him in any position, nickel, outside, or safety, and feel really comfortable about him. And the Denver Broncos take him. And if you want to watch my reaction, I think I genuinely went, oh, I screamed out loud because I love this pick. And I love Jahdae Barron as a person, as a player, as a Longhorn. He embodied the school. And again, I'm a Longhorns fan, so you can see why. And I'm not giving this pick an A because he's a Longhorn. I'm not giving it that. I think the fit is incredible. But I felt so happy for Jahdae to be put into this situation because I was a little bit fearful that he was going to go to a team with some bad members in the secondary and he was going to have to be their true lockdown cornerback 1. And I didn't think he was quite that good. But playing alongside Surtain, playing alongside that defensive front 7, playing alongside who they already have in the secondary, and man, Jahdae Barron is just a plug and play player that does so much for this defense. This is my favorite pick of the draft, or one of, I should say. Again, I'm a Jade guy. I just think it makes so much sense. This Denver defense went from great to greater. I think Jade Barron, I don't know what he plays. Does he play nickel? Does he play outside corner? I think that's what he'll likely do. But man, Surtain on one side, Jade on the other side. Yeah, good luck throwing against this defense. This defense is freaking awesome. I give it an A. Only reason why I don't give it an A+ is you're just feeding into what you're already rich at. You're rich on defense. Now you're richer on defense. You could have maybe added a receiver, but I don't know. If you say, would you rather have taken Matthew Golden or Jade Barron? I think I might go Jade Barron. I just think it could go either way. So let's move on. Derek Harmon to Pittsburgh. Maybe the one point in the draft where there was a lot of drama, like leading into it. We're like, oh, is this Shador? Is this Jackson Dart? Nah, just Derek Harmon, which I guess in some ways is kind of what Pittsburgh does sometimes. Pittsburgh, man, if they don't figure out this quarterback position, this is going to look really ugly next year. But for Derek Harmon, I think he's a good player. He's probably going to fill in for Cameron Hayward when he does eventually retire. I mean, he's still playing really well, but man, I see a lot of Hayward and Harmon. Not saying they're identical players or Harmon's going to be as good, but I can see what the Pittsburgh Steelers are drafting in him this year. I mean, a good disruptor, can get to the quarterback, really good against the run, just does a lot of things very solidly. Now, admittedly speaking, he only has like one true great year, but I'm willing to buy into that one true great year. I only give this one a B- because, man, I don't know who's going to play quarterback for this team, and that's a serious concern. So I give it a B-. Good pick. The defensive line gets better, but man, I hope it's not Mason Rudolph next year. All right, another one of those picks that was a bit of a head scratcher, but when I kind of talked myself with it, when I kind of talked myself more through it, I kind of felt like, yeah, this is just exactly what the Chargers would do. Now, they did bring in Najee Harris. Now, I don't know, I can't remember on the top of my head what the contract details are. I don't think it's a one-year deal, but it might be. You guys can let me know in the comment section below. Man, Amari Hampton, though, he just fits this offense perfectly. Jim Harbaugh, physical, run it down your throat style. With Amari Hampton, whose style is run it down your throat, truck three people over, and push it into the end zone. It just kind of feels like a perfect fit. And Amari Hampton was a guy who I feel like you had to be a specific scheme to work with him. Now, he could have worked in any scheme, but I think particularly a scheme like the Chargers or the Lions that just want to punch it through your throat, that's exactly what Amari Hampton's going to do. Now, I don't know if this instantly makes this Chargers offense significantly better because they already kind of had Najee Harris, but long-term play here, Amari Hampton's going to be fantastic for Justin Herbert and for Jim Harbaugh. It's going to work out, but it just kind of depends on when. So we'll have to wait and see. But man, I give it a B. I only give it a B because I think I maybe would have took Matthew Golden here and then waited on a running back in rounds 2 or 3, but don't hate the pick at all. I mean, Amari Hampton with Najee Harris, and then eventually at some point he takes over as the true lead back, and man, he's just going to run through people's throat. And it's such a Jim Harbaugh move, by the way. It screams Harbaugh, and I love it. I just love it. All right, next, the Green Bay Packers. A great moment, by the way. They're in, of course, Green Bay for the draft, and the crowd's going crazy. They're like, oh, we want a receiver, and they bring out somebody, I think the president of the Green Bay Packers, and he basically spoils the pick, but eventually Matthew Golden becomes their guy. Look, I would say this. Matthew Golden is one of the few receivers in this draft class that has wide receiver 1 ceiling. Now, granted, I don't know if he'll ever be a wide receiver 1. I don't want to just throw that out loosely, but it's Matthew Golden, it's Ted McMillan, it's Travis Hunter, and maybe Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka could get there, but I would feel a bit more comfortable saying that Golden can hit that ceiling. It's just going to need some time. Jordan Love was on an offense last year, receiving-wise, that he just couldn't trust his receivers. They had drop issues. They just couldn't separate too much. Golden kind of fixes all those issues. Golden is very sure-handed, at least most of the time. Good route runner. Very fast athlete. I mean, ran a 4.39, 4.29, something along those lines. And he moves just super smooth. And I think with this offense, he's going to be schemed open. He's going to be given a lot of opportunities. And I could see Matthew Golden being a big-time contributor on this offense. So I love this pick. I give it an A just because the talent was there. It moved in, or it fell into your laps. You took them. You gave the crowd a great moment. And finally, the Green Bay Packers take a receiver for the first time since 2002 or 3, which was, I was born in 2002, so it's been that freaking long. So good pick here for the Green Bay Packers. And finally, Jordan Love can celebrate with a new receiver. So I like the move here. I give it an A. Moving on to I would say, and I hate to say this, and if Donovan Jackson happens to watch this, I apologize. This was probably the low light of the draft in terms of just my attention. It was kind of boring. I was expecting a Malachi Starks, maybe a Will Johnson. Nah, just a Donovan Jackson. Don't get me wrong. Good player, instant contributor on the offensive line. Probably going to play guard, but with some injuries, can play tackle, which is nice to have that versatility. Again, I think the secondary could have used a bit more help. Malachi Starks, Will Johnson would have been nice, but at the same time, they go Donovan Jackson, versatile guard, just does so much for this team. Smart player, moves around net very well. I think he's a solid scheme fit too. I give it a B just because it's kind of a boring pick. I would have preferred a Malachi Starks, but we got more action down the board. In fact, I think we got some action right after this pick. So to any Minnesota Vikings fan, sorry that your first round is a little bit boring, but Donovan Jackson will be a great player for you, so no issues here. He'll be on your roster for the next 6+ years and just be super solid for you. Here we go. All right. Let's have the conversation. The New York Giants, they trade back into the first round for not Shador, for Jackson Dart. Okay. If you guys have the time, or if you guys are interested, I would suggest watching a few of our videos, primarily our top 10 quarterbacks video, and you guys can see how I personally feel about Jackson Dart. Or you can watch our big board, our top 75 big board, and you will see that Dart's not on there. Or you can watch our NFL draft hot takes, where one of my hot takes is that Jackson Dart is not a top 100 player in this class. And I stand by all of those. I will sit here with my foot down, and I could be very wrong, and I hope I am, by the way. But I would not have drafted Jackson Dart with a first-round pick. I would have struggled taking him with a second-round pick, just because I think he is such a developmental piece. To the same extent that like Anthony Richardson was, I think Jackson Dart is also that much of a project. And my one thing with Jackson Dart is I don't know if he has a true elite skill set. I don't really see anything about him that's elite. Like with Anthony Richardson, you can at least talk me into his athleticism and his arm talent. Same thing with Milroe. I look at Dart and I say, okay, his only elite trait is that he's a competitive freak. And you could call me a competitive freak because I like to gamble. If I'm gambling, I might be a competitive freak. Not a good one, but you get my point. So for Jackson Dart to be the pick here, I'm going to say this again. I'm of two minds. On one hand, the Giants did not have a good quarterback prospect to develop, so now they at least have that guy. But on the other hand, I'm like, man, I think I would have preferred a Milroe or a Shador over Jackson Dart. That's just my opinion. But nonetheless, Jackson Dart will be the quarterback for the Giants, at least in the future. He'll probably sit behind Wilson and Jameis, which, by the way, will be great for him. Like, both those quarterbacks are veterans, have been in for a while. I mean, Jackson Dart can learn a thing or two from them. Hopefully not the interception throwing ability of Jameis, but he'll learn a couple of things from them. And hopefully with the development of Brian Dable, who, by the way, Brian Dable is going to be, man, every single day talking to this dude because, let's be honest, his job kind of depends on Jackson Dart. He has to make it work. So, I don't know. For me, I would have rather had banked on Shador more so than Jackson Dart, but I give him credit. It's a risky bet, and if it works out, I think it could work out quite nicely. I give this one a C just because I would have preferred Shador. I'm a lot higher on Shador than I am with Jackson, but I also can see why they might prefer the upside of Jackson Dart more so than the limited upside of Shador. So I give it a C. Definitely was one of the higher points of the draft. So we had another trade up, and this is where I want to talk about the Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. conversation, where I want to kind of put these two guys together. 1 second, need my water. You guys got to understand, I've been talking all day. I just did a full video on my channel about this draft. I've been talking to my family about things, and now I'm here with you guys. But I'm loving it, man. The draft is so much fun. It's one of the few times in the NFL season where the entire NFL community just kind of comes together. Because like during the season, we all hate each other because like we all want to win games and win the Super Bowl. But like in the draft, it's all like, oh, good player, good pickup. It's a really cool thing, and you get to meet new people and talk to new people. It's really fun, good times. But back to the Atlanta Falcons. All right, let's talk about Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. I like the haul for the Falcons. I really do. I, admittedly speaking, am not the highest on either player per se. I don't have James Pierce Jr. as a first-round grade. And for Jalen Walker, it would have been a late first-round grade, but I definitely see the upside. I just feel like, man, if these players work out, Atlanta's going to have two freak shows in this defense. One, a versatile piece that can be a linebacker or an outside linebacker or an edge, and then one in James Pierce Jr. that will come off the edge. Now, both these dudes are incredible freaks. They move around so well. They just need some development. For James Pierce Jr., there has to be more to his game than just just a speed rush. There has to be, all these different things with your hands you can do, all these different pass rush skill sets, the nuance of just getting to your guy. He's got to learn that. And I also do worry a bit about his size. He's a lighter frame guy that I can see strong tackles just kind of pushing around and moving quite easily. So I do worry about that. But he does have an elite trait, which is his athleticism. So if he can develop, maybe put on a bit more muscle, I like it. I'm also a little bit worried. I don't know the guy, but there were some character concern questions. Sorry. And if those are real, then I look at this Falcons defensive line and I say, who's the vet who can get that out of him? And I don't really see that. Now, maybe I'm missing somebody that Falcons fans can let us know about, but that feels like a really young defensive line that I kind of worry won't be able to take out a big ego. Now, granted, Raheem Morris is the coach, and I believe in him, but that is a bit of a concern. With Jalen Walker, I don't worry about that at all. I do think he's a project player, though, who, man, is going to learn on the fly, can be a disruptor early on. But I think you have to figure out, is he a linebacker, is he an edge, or is he just a weapon X that you can just throw all over your defense? Regardless, though, you're getting two just freak show athletes that are going to be a lot of fun if they definitely do work out. So for now, I give James Pierce a C-, but if it works out, same with Jalen Walker, it could be nasty. And this was a Falcons team that, let's be honest, they needed freak shows in that defense, and they might have them. They just need some time and development. And I'm not the biggest believer in James Pierce, but man, it could definitely work out for them. All right, Baltimore takes Malachi Starks. I think this is likely to move Kyle Hamilton a bit closer to the line of scrimmage. I've been high on Malachi Starks since the get-go. He's been pretty safely in my top 20 for the while now, and I think he's in my top 15. I don't have my board on me, but I think he was in my top 15. So for him to fall to the Baltimore Ravens was great for them. I mean, he's just a really solid member you can add to your defense. He's just going to be super good. I know safeties is one of those positions you don't typically draft early, but man, when you're already a good team and a good player falls into your lap that you feel really comfortable is going to be a great player that will make Pro Bowls and All-Pros, I don't think you overthink it. It's kind of like the whole thing with Derwin James, where when Derwin James came out, it was like, hey, this dude's going to be an all-star. He's going to be fantastic, but we can't take him top 15 because he's a safety. Same thing with Malachi Starks. He'll be a great player who's undervalued because he's a safety. So good pick here for the Baltimore Ravens. And I am starting to lose my voice, so let's kind of get through these ones. All right, Detroit took Tyleik Williams. This one for me was a bit of a question mark. I did not have a first-round grade on Tyleik. I had a mid-second to late second-round grade on Tyleik. I think he's a great run stuffer who can be a disruptor in the passing game. But man, he's a really kind of a nothing burger in the pass rushing game. He's really just right now a run stuffer. And I looked at this Detroit team and I'm like, they already kind of had some decent defensive tackles. They kind of needed just another edge rusher or a corner. And with Donovan Ezeragu, Braden Swinson, Mike Green on the board, not to mention Will Johnson still being on the board. Kind of thought that one of those guys was going to be the pick, but I will say Tyleik does fit the culture perfectly. Just a nasty dude who's physical, strong, will break your ACL, will break your toe. Like he's willing to do that to get the quarterback. So I just think that might have been the reason why we took him. But again, value sake here. Now, granted, Detroit is one of those teams that just says F value. We're taking the guy we want, and it typically works out. So I'm sure this one will too. All right, Washington took Josh Conerly at 29. Now, I think Conerly's a good player. I think there's a very good chance that Conerly ends up becoming a really good tackle or just a really good starter for a team. My question becomes, what are they going to do with this offensive line? Like, how are they going to work it out? Because, you already have Laramie Tunsil, who you're assuming is going to be your long-term left tackle for as long as he might play. Sam Cosmi is injured, but you think you're pretty good at guard with him. Tyler Biadasz at center, you're not going to get off of him. Allegretti at guard, you're probably replacing, and I wonder if that's where Conerly plays, or if you're going to put Brandon Coleman there, or Andrew Wiley. So, but I'm thinking, like, what happens when you're healthy? Like, if a fully healthy Commander's offensive line, I'm assuming it's Tunsil, Wiley, Biadasz, Cosmi, and Conerly. which then puts Coleman as like your backup that can do all sorts of things, whether it's guard or tackle, and same with Allegretti. But I also kind of think like, whoa, Will Johnson was on the board. He would have been nice. Mike Green's on the board. That would have been nice. But protecting your quarterback, I understand. I just kind of felt like the offensive line was already kind of set. Now, granted, injuries are into play here and you're trying to win now, but I think you could have put Brandon Coleman somewhere and maybe just banked on, Cosby coming back at some point. But maybe Cosby's injury is a bit more serious than we think. And if that's the case, then I understand this pick a bit more. I would have probably just taken Mike Green because he's a high upside edge rusher that this team could really use. But they passed on it. They go with Connerly. I think he'll be a good player. So I give it a C just because don't think it's their biggest need. But again, just draft good players. So maybe you can boost that to like a C plus, B minus now that I think about it. All right, Maxwell Hairston. This one was a little bit of a reach for me. I just thought that Will Johnson's on the board. You take Will Johnson. But Maxwell Hairston seems like a pretty solid scheme fit with the Buffalo Bills defense. With it being the 30th overall pick, I can definitely stomach taking Maxwell Hairston here. He's got ball productivity, can get the ball quite nicely. Just somebody who fits the scheme quite nicely with Buffalo. And I think, you know what, at the end of the day, maybe Will Johnson has more injury concerns that we actually, think is, I'm saying this so badly, but maybe Will Johnson's injuries are that serious and that we need to be more concerned about it. And they just believe in what Maxwell Hairston can become. So I kind of wonder if that's why he was drafted or brought into the draft room, because Buffalo was like, hey, if you're available, we're taking you. And so, because I thought it was kind of weird that of all players, Maxwell was there. And I was like, he's not a first rounder, but I guess now it all kind of checks out. Buffalo, they let the league office know. So that's funny. All right, let's talk about it. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, so you guys know I hate the Philadelphia Eagles, but at the same time, game is game. I got to respect it. This was my favorite pick of the draft. Jahad Campbell, watch my big board. I think he's 5th overall, or he's at least top 10. I love Jahad Campbell. I would have considered Jahad Campbell as early as pick 10 for the Chicago Bears. I would have considered him, actually, no, let me rephrase that. I would have considered him at pick 8 for the Carolina Panthers. I know there's a shoulder injury, and it could be serious. But my God, guys, Jahad Campbell, if he comes back from this injury, which he will, he'll be fine. He's going to be a great player. And the fact that this guy fell to 31 to the Super Bowl champions just is ridiculous. And by the way, they don't even really need linebacker that badly. They have Bond. They have Nakobe Dean. They took the dude from Clemson last year. Like, they have bodies. They had much bigger needs. But Jahad Campbell is now a freaking Philadelphia Eagle. And I'm going to have to live playing this team twice with Jahad Campbell on their defense. And by the way, Jahad has experience playing edge in high school. He might very well end up being put over as an edge rusher on this team, which is kind of a big need for this team. I don't know how they're going to deploy him, but Jahad Campbell, if healthy, big caveat, if healthy, is one of the best players in this draft class. And Philadelphia just snagged him at 31 overall. Ridiculous. Pisses me off. But hey, Roseman, Howie, shout out you, brother. You get the job done. You do it every single year. You take the best player available, even if it's just a slight need, and you get Jalen Carter, and you get Jahad Campbell, you get Nolan Smith, you get Jalen Hurts. It just works out for them. And they're great in free agency. Things I would do to fire Jerry Jones for Howie Roseman. All right, lastly, Kansas City took Josh Simmons. This was probably best case scenario for Kansas City because they felt like, okay, we have Jalen Moore, but we're not too confident in him. Granted, they paid him like they're confident, but they're not overly confident with him. Josh Simmons allows this team to have multiple different versions of what this offensive line could look like, and a healthy and good character Josh Simmons is a top 10 pick. So for Kansas City, the value just fell right into their laps. Only reason why I'm giving it an A- is the injuries could be a legit issue. So if the injuries are fine, then yeah, this is an awesome pick. And the Kansas City Chiefs kind of shore up their offensive line a little bit more. And I feel a lot better about this Chiefs offense now after Josh Simmons, more so than I did beforehand. So that is going to do it for our grading of round 1. Next video, we're going to be grading every single pick, let me rephrase that. Next video, me and Cade are going to be on, and we're going to be grading every single team's report card, looking through every single team's draft class and giving him a grade. So check that out. That'll be out, I think, Monday, but it could be out sooner. I don't know. But if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Glad you guys enjoyed, and make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. Again, love you guys. Peace.